live format. So we already had one live on this channel a few months ago. You can check the live recordings. We keep all the live recordings on the channel. That was talking about the audits, how to survive a SPLA audit. What we're going to talk about today is how to properly manage SPLA so you don't get issues with audits, you maximize your return on investment, you sleep better. So this is going to be the topic for today. Say hello everybody again. Where are you from? What brought you here? What questions do you have for today's live? Help each other in the chat. This is what we usually do. So we're going to start at 2 o'clock exactly. I planned this session for 2 hours. So 2 o'clock British time. It's about, I think it's 9 a.m. In the United States East Coast. A bit early probably for the West Coast, but I know lots of West Coasters who wake up at 5 and they go, watch lives on YouTube, listen to podcasts. So if you're from the United States, I admire your bravery, and I don't expect anyone from Australia or New Zealand right now on this live. But by all means, what brings you here? Why are you here? Why are you interested in the topic of SPLA? And most importantly, please ask your questions. Please ask your questions, because your questions help us to properly prepare for the next versions of the same live. So a few months ago, we said that we're going to do a SPLA live as a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And then we saw a tremendous interest in SPLA. Although there are very few searches for SPLA on YouTube, we can see that if somebody comes to watch the SPLA videos, they just binge watch them. So we decided, because this is one of the businesses we provide. So our company is called SAMexpert, which is the company that is behind this channel. SAMexpert TV is a separate business, but there's a company behind it, which does various Microsoft cloud and software licensing, especially around financial planning consulting. SPLA is my personal love. In my previous employment, for instance, I created the whole SPLA practice in the company called Derived Logic. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a part of the Livingston Group right now. But I created SPLA practice there. I was leading the SPLA practice there for a few years, and I dealt with lots of audits. I'll show you the number. So, as a part of today's preparation and warm up, let me just remind you, if you want to. I'm not begging. You can connect to us on LinkedIn. Even if you go to my profile, all the links are in the description anyway, under this video. So even if you go to my profile, there's a follow button, but you can actually send me a connection request if you want to have a one-to-one chat. And my messages are open for everyone anyway. You can follow our company, which is a consulting business. You can follow our company on LinkedIn, and also. If you want to be notified about these live shows and new uploads, that's probably the only reason, right? So if you want to be notified of anything new that we upload here, or any new lives, you can set reminders on live shows that will pop up on your YouTube app on your phone. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube. And there's one thing I'm asking always. If you could, please, if you like this video, please click like. If you dislike this video, please click dislike. Thank you. We have a few questions. Hello, greetings from Finnish archipelago. I love Finland. I used to live in Russia and travel through Finland and in Finland a lot. I love it. Karin, finally alive in regards of SPLA. So Karin, I would expect you to have questions about SPLA. So please, by all means, please ask them during the live. And we have a greeting from Ken. It is early afternoon in Stirling, Scotland. As a procurement professional, I'm keen to learn how this SPLA works. So here goes. Brilliant. So Ken, I suspect you're interested in how SPLA works from the end customer's point of view. So this is not really the topic of today's SPLA live, but I'm happy to spend time to answer your questions. So please stay with me. Just listen to what's going on. And then if you're interested from the end customer's point of view, I will answer your questions. I promise you. So yeah, let's probably start moving on, warming up. So you probably know me. I mean, why otherwise would you come to this channel? But just in case if you don't, because people on YouTube, you need to expect that people on YouTube have zero context. Where the hell am I? What am I doing here today? So I'm the CEO and founder of the project called SAMexpert. That since 2009, it was a community-based blogging platform. First in my native language, then I opened an English language version, and then this year it has become a commercial brand. I used to have a company in my previous life. Now this is a new project, but I've been for 20 plus years in this industry, and as I said, SPLA is my personal love. And one of the questions that I sometimes cheekily get from some people: why would I even listen to you, Alex? Well, there's a 537 million reasons why. Because that's an estimate of how much money. Sorry for the disclaimer. That's an estimate of how much money was involved in SPLA audits or SPLA optimizations. Mostly in audits. I have to be open about this. Mostly in audit bills, or first audit bills and first audit reports that we then help mitigate. That is the amount of things that I've dealt with throughout my career in SPLA itself. So yeah, let me skip through the disclaimer. I'll just flash it on the screen, and then we'll just move on. We're getting questions already. So let me pick some of the questions. Good ones. I can answer it right now. Which SPLA licenses can be used in Azure? Go to service provider user rights document. You can Google it. There's a new version that was released on the 1st of September, and look for the licenses that are DCP eligible. And I will cover this topic of DCP eligibility in this particular live, but a short answer to your question is look up DCP eligible licenses, because Azure, essentially for you, if you're a SPLA provider, Azure for you is just another SPLA provider, which in terms of SPLA is a data center provider for you. So using third-party data center to provide your service to your own customers. So the licenses that are DCP eligible may be brought to SPLA. We have another question. So hi Jitendra, by the way. OS licenses are based in the details of the physical host. If the licenses are hosted in the DC provider, are you unable to get the details of the host? How do you license the operating system? So good question. Good question. Operating systems are not DCP eligible, so you may not bring them to Azure. Simple. So check that in the product terms. Hi Jitendra. So well, hi Dylan. Hi Ken. Hi Karen again. So let's move on. So why are we even talking about this? Well, SPLA is a business of making profits. Every business exists for two reasons. One reason is to what we put in our mission statement. We want to make this world better. We want to help millions of other customers. I want to help. One of my missions is I want to help my customers not to overpay for Microsoft licenses, regardless of the channel or cloud. I want to help my customers to only invest in what you need to invest into. That's my mission. That's why I'm independent. I'm like, I don't care about Microsoft. I don't care about their sales targets. I don't care about their agenda. I like the product. I care about you. That's my mission. But I'm a mission. I'm a business of making a profit. So if I would say I'm here as a charity, okay, this channel is a charity. This channel has costed me 3,000 hours of my time already. And the amount of money I've made from this channel is £20 so far. So this is a charitable thing, but my business is making a profit. And any SPLA business, why would you be a provider if you're not making a profit? So which are the What are the obstacles to making a profit? And thank you for the questions. By the way, I will be answering them between sections of this presentation, so keep them coming, please. The obstacles are undercharging your customers for your services. And I can tell you stories. So once a provider from Ireland called us and said, "Can you guys do an internal review, because we're expecting we will probably be audited by Microsoft." So Microsoft right now, by the way, Microsoft right now, they don't almost audit commercial customers, at least in the Western world. I'm not sure about the Eastern world, but we're not seeing many audits there. But they very aggressively audit SPLA providers. So if you're a SPLA provider, expect Microsoft to come. They've probably already come to you at least once. Expect them to come, every 2 years ish on average. So going back to my story, so a provider from Ireland called us and said, "Can you please look at our licensing SPLA estate?" And we looked at that. And it was all, pretty like it's like an average state, not squeaky clean, not huge surprises except for one surprise. So they developed their own solution that ran on SharePoint, and they used SharePoint hosting licenses for their solution. And they were planning to charge their customers based on the cost of that license divided by whatever formulas they used. When we looked at how the solution is designed, the architecture of the solution, we realized they may not use SharePoint hosting licenses for that solution because of various security logins and levels of access. And if you know, SharePoint hosting requires you to basically provide the same level of access to everybody. Not necessarily like that, but very close to that. So their solution was not compliant with the terms of the license. And then when we looked at the other commercial solution, that would have costed them 100, I'm not exaggerating, 100 times more. That was devastating because they already had financial plans. They had a business plan. They had investors in that solution. That was devastating. Fortunately, though, for them, we talked to developers and then we realized they can actually run it on a free SharePoint Foundation basis. They don't really need full SharePoint. But there you go. So it's one of the most extreme cases of undercharging customers for services. But I've seen other things, incorrectly calculated Windows Server licenses and customers being charged less than the provider had to pay to Microsoft. Well, and then the other obstacles are, overpaying for the licenses, over-reporting. Not ubiquitous, but every provider, even those who heavily underreported something, I've seen over-reporting in other areas. The bad thing about over-reporting is that you can't really recover that money. So you have to. There's no mechanism. There's no engine to recover your money. It's gone. It's like a commitment. You've paid it. Microsoft just says, "Thank you for your money. You're not going to get it back." In an audit, you may potentially, it's not guaranteed, you may potentially, and we use that always, use it as to reduce your penalties. Because come on, we've paid that. So if you can prove that was that was an overpayment, well. And then the third thing is non-compliance penalties, the audits. Do I need to spend your time talking about just audits? I don't know. I think you realize what we're talking about. I've showed you the number, $500 million. Hi, Carl. Carl, it's glad to have you here today as well. So that was the story about that provider, and fortunately we managed to stop it. So I've got questions from Dylan coming. So why don't we pick them up right now? Not to the Azure, but the large hosting companies. It's the same. Azure is just another hosting company from that point of view. From the SPLA point of view, think about Azure as another hosting company. All the rules are exactly the same. Hosting companies that purchase hardware and sell the VMs. So really don't understand that question. But I mean, if you can just elaborate on it, I would probably happily answer it. Well, you don't. So, Dylan, you shouldn't be sorry for your questions. I do appreciate questions. That's the whole point about the live shows. I could have recorded a video talking of me talking to the camera. I'm good at that. But the good thing is that we can talk. We can talk. You have access to me in real life, in real time, and I can answer your questions. Another question: if you want to license one virtual machine on a host with 64 physical cores, will you have to pay all 60 cores for the one virtual machine? Yes. If you want to license one standard, yes. Data center gives you unlimited virtualization rights. If you have a host with hundreds of Linux VMs and one Windows VM, just license all the 64 cores with standard. It gives you right to run one VM. One, not two, by the way, not two. If SQL Server is being run on a VM in a cluster, does it have to be SQL Enterprise? No. No. Why? Could be SQL Standard. So, moving on to back to business. So, but that's not the only obstacle to business. So right now, Microsoft is using non-compliance as a push to Azure. So what happens is in many audits, Microsoft come and say, okay, you owe us that much. You owe us that many millions of dollars or thousands of dollars. We'll forgive you that if you commit to moving 30% of your, I'm giving you approximate numbers. It could be various numbers across the board. Say if you move 30% of your customer workloads into our public cloud, i.e. Azure, keep the business, keep the customer, become a CSP, start reselling Azure. They wanted to change your business model. And if you don't want to, I mean, I have nothing against it. I have to tell, I have nothing against it. You have to adapt. Microsoft will, at some point, pull everybody into CSP, and the fate of Azure is not really sealed yet, so we don't know what's going to happen. There are various rumors and various thoughts, but there's no real information. But the question here is, do you want to do this on your own terms, or do you want to be caught red-handed and then made to move to Azure? Do you want that disruption to your business? So these are the obstacles to properly making money and having good sleep. So how do you get from that point A of frustrations and questions and doubts to the point when you can sleep well, to the point when you have when you maximize your ROI, return on investment, when you're fully compliant, and when you're paying correct bills to Microsoft and your customers are paying correct bills to you? There are not that many things that you need to do, really, and what I'm going to be talking about, the entirety, the rest of this live is things that are most important from the cases of audits and reviews I was involved in. So maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something that you've seen. I'm talking here today from my personal experience, and I'm giving you advice based on my personal experience, helping others like you with SPLA audits and SPLA management. So firstly, know your obligations. So go ahead and read your the whole SPLA document stack, which includes Microsoft Business and Services Agreement, SPLA itself. You may have signed the License Mobility Addendum. You may have signed the QMTH Addendum. Read them all very carefully. Then read Service Provider Use Rights. And then in certain cases, you actually also need to know Microsoft product terms, although that's not about the hosting license. That's about the bring your own licenses. So you need to know rules for all the rules for bring your own licenses are in two documents. First is the License Mobility Addendum with the process that you must follow. The other one, if your customers must want to bring their license, that's what I'm talking about. The other document that you need to read is product terms, because product terms tell your end customers what they are permitted to bring to your data center. So it's a pretty complicated stack of documents, but I encourage you start reading it, because I'm tired of already, and it's almost, I mean, I really don't know how to react to this. This is a bit of a rant. when you talk to legal in a provider and they are surprised, they ask questions like, do they even have a right to auditors? What do we need to provide? It's all written there. I mean, I'm not making this up. It's all written there. And SPLA, by the way, is one of the most clear documents in the Microsoft licensing world. Jitendra, thank you so much for becoming a channel member. So I've enabled channel membership here. If you want to support this channel, right now there's only one level, $2.99 per month. By all means, please join us. What we promise right now is occasional just thoughts and licensing advice that we're not happy to post on any other platforms. We're not taking anything away from the regular memberships and regular communities, just a bit extra on top of that I don't want to make that public yet. So we're going to introduce other levels and other perks, but that's what we have right now. So Jitendra, I mean, thank you from the depth of my heart. And let's start with a basic one. So I remind you, you probably know that, but I'll remind you, you're responsible for every piece of Microsoft software plus access licenses that is in your data centers. You're even responsible for every piece of Microsoft software licenses that you host on a third-party provider. Unless you have protections in place, and those protections that you must have in place, they're given to you by Microsoft itself. It's not something you need to make up. It's there. It's already there. So there's a document that is called End User License Terms. Let's talk about where it must apply, where your obligations around that document are. Let's look at typical providers, pretty typical providers' relationship with various entities. So firstly, this is you. And you have your direct end customers to whom you provide your services directly. They come to you, they buy services from you, either on the web or you sign like a real signed contract with every customer. You're also allowed, and this is stipulated, how you must arrange your relationship with software services resellers. It's in SPLA. You can read SPLA. There's a definition of software services reseller. And they may have their own end customers. You're not even seeing them. They're reselling your services to those end customers. So that's another relationship you must take care of because you're responsible for what these software services resellers are doing. And then you may have other providers, your partners, that host something in your data centers. And that's not uncommon either. And they have their own resellers and then their own end customers. And then they have end customers that come through their software resellers. So it's a complicated chain, 4 steps, 6 steps, multiple steps. What you must do is at least you need to protect your first level. In all the contracts, you must stipulate who's responsible for what. And there's one piece of paper, one document that you must propagate, project, distribute through this whole entire relationship chain. You must do that. And again, I'm quoting SPLA agreement itself. There's an addendum that is given to you with the SPLA agreement that is called End User License Terms. So what you must do is you must take all these end user license terms. You may add your own on top, but you must, it's a must. It's not an option. Make it a part of all your contracts. And you must make sure that your software resellers make it a part of their contracts with their customers. And then you must make sure, you have to take all the commercially viable measures to make sure other providers do not use Microsoft software in a non-compliant way. So that's your obligation. You must do it. So, as I said, make sure end user license term is included in all your contracts. Must be included in all the resellers' contracts. Publish your contract templates on the web. So the providers I deal with, if they provide services publicly, they publish every single template on the web. So their users can read the contract, they can see the terms before they even commit, to the service the provider. AWS does it. If you want a very good example of how to write your own explanations, user-friendly explanatory pages, how to publish your public offer contracts, look at Amazon. Amazon is a SPLA provider. Look at other big SPLA providers. What do they do? Learn from them. And unless you do that, you're responsible for everything. You must have an excuse for an auditor to say, no, I'm not. This is what's strictly stipulated in my contract. I'm only supporting this. And they have end-user license terms. They signed under those end-user license terms. Then you are protected. Sort of. But in most cases, you are. So please be careful with end-user license terms. Please be careful. So that's the question I get from providers like you. How do we indemnify ourselves from end users deploying something without our knowledge? This is how. This is how. Then we have bring your own license, which is a funny thing. So there are 3 levels of providership from the SPLA term, from the SPLA point of view. First is when you've just signed SPLA. When you have just signed SPLA, the only allowed bring your own license scenario for your customers. So they want to take their own licenses and bring into a SPLA data center. By the way, however, if we have end customers here right now on this channel, I'm talking about you right now. So if you want to bring your own licenses, so you may only bring your own licenses if a provider is just a pure SPLA provider, no additional addendums, no additional certifications, no additional allowance. What's the word I'm looking for? No other eligibility, which I'll cover next. Then you may only bring your own licenses to a dedicated hardware. Then when we talk about the hardware that's dedicated to you, there's no sharing, even with the provider themselves. Dedicated hardware in all the scenarios accepts any license. Any license. There are no strings attached. There's no software assurance requirement unless it's one of the big 4 providers, but this is not the case what we're discussing right now. So you may bring your own licenses to so-called authorized providers, SPLA providers. Then if a provider has a license mobility addendum signed, and how can you check if a provider has a license mobility addendum? You can Google license mobility, Microsoft license mobility partners. There's a PDF that's updated on a monthly basis, which lists all the authorized license mobility providers. What rights does it give? So basically, if you're a provider and you've signed that, you probably know why you signed it, but as a reminder, it means that end users now may bring their own licenses with active software assurance, only eligible products, not every product, so Windows Server is not eligible, and install it on the shared hardware with one caveat. All end users must follow the so-called license verification process, and you as the provider must keep all these license verification documents, the form that goes through Microsoft back to you. You must keep it. It's a compliance issue. You're going to be penalized if you don't do that. You can't just claim to an auditor, a provider is using my end customer is using their own licenses, they have software assurance. That doesn't work like that. That end customer must submit a form to Microsoft, and Microsoft must sign it off, and then it gets to you, and then you must also manage, have some sort of an alerting system, which will alert you when that license expires. So you know that customer is now potentially non-compliant. So, and then again, there are 2 products which are like a big red flag, which you still may not host under any circumstances until you have a QMTH addendum, qualified multi-tenant hosting, which is Office 365 and Windows 10. Windows 11, I'm not sure. I put a question mark here because Microsoft, we are not guaranteed that Microsoft will allow the hosting of Windows 11 in SPLA, even with QMTH. So we're not guaranteed. Let's wait until October when it's publicly available, when we have potentially updated terms. That is going to be, by the way, mentioned in product terms. not in SPLA. Service provider's rights does not apply to qualified multi-tenant addendum. Let me pick some questions here because that's it's good timing. So Karen, what's the best approach to correcting license usage towards Microsoft? There's no stipulated process to correct over licensing, and for under licensing you have 15 days, as far as I remember. So Microsoft keeps changing the contract. As far as I remember the terms, if you under license something, you still have 15 days to submit an additional report to your reseller, to your SPLA reseller. So check your SPLA. Check your SPLA. It's all there. There's no correction for over licensing, unfortunately. Very cheeky from Microsoft, isn't it? Are there any reporting tools that are worth using that can give you SPLA reporting with one click? No, there's no tool that can give you SPLA reporting with one click. So I'll get to tools in the end of this presentation. I have a slide about tools, but SPLA is the easiest licensing model to cover with the tool. Still, I'm planning another live on this channel in which I'll be talking about what you need to expect from your SPLA tool. When? Probably in a couple of months. Not earlier, not before that. I need to prepare. And I don't know if you know or not, I'm running also a Microsoft licensing training on this channel, which is taking like 70% of my time right now. So, but I'm going to have a live here, which will be just giving you a very detailed explanation of which tools can do, what they cannot do. I'm not talking about particular tools, but what you must not expect from a tool to do, which is your manual task, which you must do yourself as a manual task. So before that live, I'm writing a cheat sheet, like a PDF, with all these details. So if you email me to, there's an email, I don't know if you can see it, ask@SAMexpert.com on top of this slide. So if you email me to that email and tell me, Alex, you promised me to give me a tool cheat sheet, what to expect from a tool, what requirements are there for the SPLA tool, send me that email, and when it's ready, I'll send it to you. So that's how it's going to work. And then, if you want to discuss it live, as I said, in a couple of months, I'll do a live about SPLA tools. Hopefully, I'll have a bit more data about what's going on in the market by that time. Have you ever been in a situation when the customer had limited, almost no documentation of historical usage, perhaps only invoices, contracts? Yeah, 90% of the situations, unfortunately. So missing historic usage is a bad thing. And that's a very bad practice. But there are very few customers who keep this history, and you must keep it. Right. There are no free tools. There was a question from Jitendra. So there are no free tools. To use bring your own license, any contract needs to be signed. So, okay, that's a good question. Thank you for that. So okay, imagine, I don't have a slide for that, but imagine you have a provider and you have Microsoft somewhere there, and you have a customer. So how this happens, the provider must be a license mobility partner. So they must sign SPLA and the license mobility addendum with Microsoft. So they must sign two things with Microsoft. In addition, there's Microsoft. Anyway, let's keep it simple. Two things: SPLA itself and an addendum. And then the end customer just needs to have a just typical hosting contract with the provider, which includes end user license terms. And then when they want to bring their own licenses, and that's it, that's the whole legal, almost the whole legal framework, except for one thing. When they want to bring their own license, they must go to Microsoft, tell Microsoft, I've got these licenses, may I use them? Microsoft says, yes, you may. Then they send that form back to the provider. Does it make sense? Does it? I hope it does. You need to sign electronically ULT? Yes, sort of. Either electronically, okay, you can sign it on paper. There are still countries where electronic signature is not accepted. And I work worldwide, and it creates all sorts of headaches. And there are UK companies that don't accept electronic signatures from those countries. Additional headache. Question. We have another question. What about QMTH? Do you have any tips on how to keep up with correct quantities? Customers can change subscriptions. As far as I know, and that's a big pain, QMTH has been live for how many years? 5, 6, 10 years? I don't know. There's no stipulated process. You need to just agree with your intermediaries how you're going to report that. There are no specific requirements. How do you keep it up? Have it all in place. It's always bespoke. Unfortunately, I've only dealt with 2 QMTH providers, so it's not enough information to really give like a overarching advice on how to do it. So please forgive me for that. So let's move on. We've got 2 hours. We've got 90 minutes left, and well, we're moving on. May you use volume licenses for hosting? So this is an interesting question that I get from providers, and I get mistakes made by providers. So I've once stopped one provider from doing that. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to just use the volume licenses for Windows Server on shared hardware, which is a big no-no. No, you can't do that. So if you want to host your own solution that you developed, it's your solution, you developed, you didn't license it, it's yours, your developers did it. Or you bought rights from a third party, but it belongs to you as an IP, intellectual property, it's yours. Then on a limited subset of products, to give you an example, Windows Server is eligible, SQL Server is eligible, SharePoint is not. So on a very limited subset of products, you may, if you dedicate hardware for it as well, then you may allow access by multiple customers, but it must be your dedicated hardware. You may not deploy it in your SPLA cloud. No, like big no. So on the dedicated hardware, your solution, limited subset of products. Then if you read product terms, search for self-hosting in product terms. There's a page dedicated to self-hosting. I have 2 videos on this channel explaining self-hosting. Then that's the only case when you may use volume licenses for hosting. No hosting of virtual machine, no access to Microsoft products. It must be access to your product, your, say, e-commerce shop. You sell merchandise. In that case, yes, please. In all the other cases, big no, must use SPLA. So just remember about that. So provider partnerships. What I was talking about DCP eligibility in the very beginning, answering Dylan's question. You may use other providers' data centers to provide SPLA services to your end customers. Other providers may use your data centers to provide software services to their end customers. And there are no addendums that need to be signed. You just need to make sure that the contractual obligations are clearly stipulated, and each party takes care of the licenses, and they report the right things. So the big rule of DCP of this provider partnership is, if a product in service provider user rights is not DCP eligible, they must be reported by the party that owns the hardware, the data center. An example, Windows Server must always be reported by the party that owns the hardware. And I've recently stopped one provider in a Far Eastern country from their partners reporting Windows Server through their SPLA agreements. The Windows Server that they consumed in their data centers. So this is not allowed. So Windows Server must be reported locally always. However, this relationship evolves. Look for DCP eligibility. Don't make that mistake. Please don't make that mistake. Moving on. You must report, this is not an option, you must report all users consuming over $1,000 of SPLA licenses per month with all their details. Why could be compliance, could be something else, could be Microsoft just collecting the details of potential customers they want to pull to Azure. Is there, right? Is there products? This is what something you signed when you signed SPLA, so you must report. Don't neglect that. So one of the types of the audits that Microsoft right now run around the world are not actually license compliance audits. They are SPLA compliance audits. And you may lose your license. You may lose your SPLA if you don't comply. It's really bad. It's not about moving you to Azure. It's about completely cutting the cord. What they check is this thing, and they check another one, which will come to in two slides from now, which is even more serious. So next slide. So what you also must report upon request, not that harsh though. If Microsoft come to you and ask you, actually, can you please give me the list of all your software services resellers? It doesn't matter that there was a polite question. You must, upon request, give all the details of your software services resellers, your agents that resell your services. You must give it to Microsoft, not on a monthly basis when they ask you. And then this is the second thing, which is quite important right now. So you must check if your end customers are under any political economical sanctions. So even if your data center is in Germany, but you provide services to say to a Russian bank called VTB, which is under sanctions, you must not do it. So you may not do it. You're not allowed. So there are certain limitations. You must check. Actually, that's your responsibility. You must check if any of your end customers, based on their country, their entity, is under American restrictions on export. If you don't do that, you can be in trouble. So Microsoft is currently auditing for such compliance, and obviously the main auditing activity is going on in those countries that are under sanctions, including Russia, for instance, or Belarus, or all those under sanctions countries. But you may also be in the EU, and you may get penalized for it. If Microsoft get a win that you're providing services to some Russian companies, make sure those Russian companies are not on the sanction list. Then you must provide, in case of an audit, that's another obligation that you must be absolutely clear about, access to your servers. In real life, you don't provide access to servers. The auditors actually don't like accessing your servers. They would ask you to provide data. What they may then ask you is to provide data, and why not? I mean, I usually suggest have all the data from all the sources, but sometimes you just may not get to a certain VM because it's highly secure. So there's no obligation to provide access to virtual machines. If you look at started the entire SPLA document stack and look at the definition of server. So server is a piece of hardware. So you have to provide access to servers. Servers are defined as a piece of hardware. Servers are not defined as virtual machines. It's a big contentious point of, we argue about it many times, but I did a paid research for a provider involving legal people. And we concluded that was our conclusion. We still haven't heard back from Microsoft that you don't have to have access to every single virtual machine. If you can't do it for various reasons, regulatory, legislative reasons, any reasons, security reasons, data protection reasons, you may not access that VM, then you don't have to have access to it. Then you need to regulate this with a contract between you and the end customer. If I'm a provider, how can I learn this? Is there a government page listing all companies? Yes, there is actually. Yes. At least the minimum thing that you need to maintain is a list of your customers in case you asked. Moving on to the next slide, customers on dedicated hardware. So customers on dedicated hardware, if they bring their own licenses, but the hardware is dedicated to your customers. So this is a bit of a relaxation of what we know about SPLA. So dedicated hardware must be treated differently to shared. Dedicated hardware has fewer limitations because by default, the document that applies to dedicated hardware is product terms. SPLA is an option on dedicated hardware. If they bring their own licenses on that dedicated hardware, which is in my case, it's 100% of time that there'll be their own licenses on dedicated hardware, some sort of their own licenses. They agree with you. Please report Windows Server for us, but we're going to bring all the SQLs and all the exchanges and all the other things too. Fine. They don't even need to do license verification if the hardware is dedicated to them. As I said, not even single VM that belongs to you. Even if that happens, please listen carefully. Even if that happens, even if that's such a free allowance, almost like a free for all, do whatever you want. Get a written statement. I've had cases when a customer said to an auditor that everything that's in that data center is licensed by that data center. Then a different audit comes to the provider, and the provider says, no, they bring their own licenses. We have a conflict of evidence. What's the word I'm looking for? Conflict of... what's the English word for somebody said something? But anyway, statements. Conflict of statements. Microsoft go with the first one because the customer said, no, it's all licensed by the provider. So Microsoft will then just tell you, you have to pay for it. Because there's no written statement, there's no written clarification. Get a written clarification with your customer. Who is responsible for which licenses? Better even make it a part of their contract. So don't just think, okay, it's dedicated, it's fine. Nobody cares. Yes, they do. Yes, they do, especially if you submit inventory from that hardware. Everything will be by default counted as your responsibility. And then you will have to prove that, especially because there are no license verification forms, you have to prove that the end customer had all the licenses to bring them onto your premises in your data center. So study the entire SPLA document stack for more details. Internal use. You may use up to 50% of all the total end user usage, but you must report and pay for it. So you may use some of the SPLA license for yourself. What I don't like about that formula is that it's misinterpreted. So it's more like it's open to interpretation. That's the word. It says 50% of the total end user usage. Does it include you or not? So if you want to stay on the safe side, treat it as you're only allowed to use up to 1/3, 33.333, up to 1/3 of the entire reported SPLA usage. And there's also a big question, how do you calculate Windows Server? There's no answer to it. So if we're talking about virtual machines, basically you just report Windows Server data center for the entirety of your cloud infrastructure. Nobody asks that question. But anything else, you must make sure that you're under that 33%. By all means, when you study all these documents, so unfortunately, as with any management process, I see things degrading. Somebody had an audit in a year, everybody forgot about it, and everything is just... I've just recently received an email, a question on LinkedIn from a person who works for a provider I helped with a huge audit. 9 figures audit. That's that sort of audit. And they came back and they started asking questions, and I realized they haven't learned anything. Or they have, and they forgot, because time has passed since that point. So it's really scary. So do regular improvements. Have some regular processes in place. Do some compliance self-checks, and involve an independent party. And I'm pointing at me, by the way. So we do this. And if you want to cheat sheet for regular improvements, send me an email to ask@SAMexpert.com asking, like, Alex, can you please give us a list of regular process for compliance reviews? It's just a list of the tick boxes. Do this, do that, do that, do that, do that on a regular basis. If you want that, so my email will welcome your questions. Know your services. Know your services. This is an interesting topic, which I learned when I started working with largest providers that not only just provide hosting, but they also provide various services to their own customers, IT outsourcing, business process outsourcing, something that is complex. Then we started carefully this definition, which I'll put on screen. I'll read it, but not the entirety. So software services. Software services is what you provide through SPLA. Is what you are licensed to provide through a SPLA agreement as a SPLA provider. That's called software services. This is the core definition of SPLA. find it in your SPLA and reread it. Take a screenshot of this presentation. Come back to that video when you have time. Reread it. So software services means services that customer is you, in this language, customer is you, provides to end users that make available, display, run, access, otherwise interact directly or indirectly with software. So if there is no interaction, direct or indirect, with Microsoft software, there's no SPLA requirement. You may have a customer to whom you provide full outsourcing of business processes, I don't know, lead generation, sales something, call center. You provide it to multiple customers. You provide this service. You don't provide access to software as long, this is very important, as long as you do not provide access to any software and all the interaction goes, say, in email between the, or you know, some word reports that you prepare manually. If there's no interaction, direct or indirect, with the software that you use for these services, there's no SPLA requirement. You may opt for SPLA, but you don't have to. And that helped some providers to exclude huge pieces of their estate from the SPLA scope entirely and license that with their own volume licenses. And especially as well, there's another thing that's highlighted here. It must be provided through internet, telephone network. You probably have read it anyway. So that's what I'm saying. So make sure that if you provide something that is not a software service, I call this business process outsourcing or BPO. What's important is that, as I said, end customer has no access to software. Not at all. Not like, oh, yeah, but we only keep 10 accounts here, so they sometimes log in and check. Then it's SPLA. I'm sorry, but then it's SPLA. And then you have to think about how you're going to license your access licenses, because strictly speaking, you need to buy SALs for your 90% of people, which are yours, and 10% of people which are there. So no, like you can't be half pregnant in this. You're either pregnant or not. You're either in SPLA or not. So you either provide access, even tiny, or you don't. So make sure you know your services. Make sure you study them, because you can save costs. It's open to interpretation from what point of view. So this is a bit scary here. So if you have a call center that works for the benefit of single customer, one customer, Microsoft may say that they see that call center to be a part of their business, therefore SPLA applies. And then you have dedication. So you have there are various ways of how to optimize this and kind of, ring fence it, which we can discuss today as well, and if there's time. So Carl, I think you're asking about. I think you're asking about self-hosting rights. If the service is IIS on Windows Server, the web page is not under this rule. There's another small print with self-hosting which says the software must add significant functionality to Microsoft products. I don't think if there's just like an HTML web page, you may use self-hosting rights for it. It must be like a proper heavy software, and they will assess it. They will assess it subjectively. So I'd be careful with that. Right. Moving on. Hosting your own software, just covered, so not going to stop here. It's that self-hosting right. So you developed it yourself, no direct access and stuff like that. I just repeated the slide. So development for end customers. Oh, a story. A provider has an end customer, and that end customer consumes about only 10 to 20% of the virtual machines as production. They have access to it. They interact with it on a daily basis. Then the rest of the biggest part of the infrastructure for that provider on a dedicated, not dedicated, on a shared platform is used for development. The provider had to face a multi-million bill for Microsoft because all the Visual Studio instances that they deployed there had to be reported as SPLA. There is no MSDN on shared hardware. Forget about that. Even if you share it between you and your end customer, even if you have a dedicated cluster in which you run production and non-production service for that cluster, it's a very interesting question. Is it just theirs and they provide you access to the platform? So then again, you must ring fence it. You must have a comparing case. But on shared hardware, there is no MSDN. So dedicate, segregate production and non-production. Create if it's development for a single customer, even segregate it in a separate cluster just for that customer, or a host with lots of VMs for development. I'm serious. This is going to bite you. This is not a good thing. So just a reminder, Visual Studio must be reported through SPLA. There's no bring your own license for Visual Studio, always through SPLA. If it's shared hardware, dedicate. Know your scope. So you need to know your scope. You need to know what you're reporting to Microsoft for, and especially in case of an audit, when they ask you to submit the data, just submit, do not over-submit, rather under-submit and then submit additional data. Know your scope. One of the things which really just surprises me is sometimes if I ask a provider, whose is that hardware? Whose is that virtual machine? They can't tell. Oh, we don't know. How do you not know? You must know what end customer runs this VM. There are a few exceptions. So I worked with a provider recently that only reports, and that's stipulated on all the contracts, so legally they're fully protected. They only report Windows Server data center, and whatever happens at the VMs is the responsibility of their end customers. Then in that case, you don't really need to know, what virtual machine is owned by whom. You don't really need to know that. But in 99% of other cases, you need to figure out who's responsible for certain things. How do you know that if you don't know whose VM is that? So you know that. Have a good CMDB, maintain it on a regular basis, know each asset's owner, each hardware, each virtual machine, have some naming conventions in place to easily recognize what's that. So kind of have a few letters or numbers for a customer, and then put it in the name of the virtual machine, so you can then easily identify who deployed it, who's responsible for it. Same goes for hardware. What it's used for as well. Development or prod. So as I said, development in SPLA is a big no-no. You have to license this production. If that's dedicated hardware to a certain customer, do they bring their own licenses? You must know that. You must know your scope really, really well. So, and I'm saying that because in the majority of cases, I'm saying the providers don't know it. Don't be that provider. Is it for business process outsourcing, as I described before? Then maybe you can exclude it from scope, from the SPLA scope. You have an option, SPLA or non-SPLA. With the scope and CMDB, again, these things degrade. They degrade painfully. So do regular checks. Recheck it. Do internal self-audits. Remember, Microsoft's audit cycle in SPLA is about 2 years. I suggest you do these checks on an annual basis. That's how you protect yourselves. Let's talk about data and tools. So completeness, trustworthiness, and management. I have a video on this channel where I talk about trustworthiness. I don't have a slide today. I didn't include it in this presentation, but let me explain to you what I mean is data may be complete. So somebody may have submitted an output from a CMDB that is maintained manually. ADDM has an option of manual maintenance. So all the data that you put in there is put in manually. There are no external connectors. The data is not really gathered in real time from any other sources. It's a fully manually maintained data. You extract the data from that CMDB. It may be complete to an extent. It may be complete. It may even be complete. But I don't trust that data, and auditors won't either, because it's manual, because it's prone to error. It's prone to manipulation, misinterpretation. It's not trustworthy. So your data must be at the same time complete and verifiable, trustworthy. The data that can be traced back to its origins and can be compared to secondary data sources. So that's very important. So you need to maintain both completeness and trustworthiness. And keep all the SPLA data safe. We had a question. Today about what happens if a provider only keeps recent history. It's a bad thing. Sometimes you need to prove to Microsoft that at that point that customer didn't have those servers. How do you do it? Because what they do in an audit, they look at the current data, and if there's no evidence that didn't exist there 2-3 years ago. I'll give you an example. A customer brought their virtual machine that they deployed in 2010 to your data center in 2020. How will the auditor see that VM as it was if it was deployed in 2010? Because that's the only data they get from scripts and tools. 2010, not 2020. So you must maintain some sort of records of historic data, historic snapshots that will demonstrate to the auditors clearly that in 2019 it wasn't there. You see? Important. Reporting history, traceable to its sources, to raw data snapshots. Save monthly snapshots because that's how audits are done per month. So you get an LP for each month. So 5 years, you get 60 LPs. There's going to be one overarching effective licensing position, but what is going to be? It's going to be a set of 60 monthly effective licensing positions, calculated based on the data that you gave the auditors. And if you only gave them today's snapshots, that's what they're gonna infer from it. Keep it at least for 5 years. And there's another thing that you need to pay attention, because that's stipulated in your SPLA, that Microsoft have a right to verify your SPLA compliance for up to 2 years after you lost all your SPLA rights and cancelled your SPLA agreements. There's still a period of 2 years, and you think, okay, fine, we've cancelled it, it's already done, dusted. No, it's not. They have 2 years to come back to you and to ask you to provide evidence of correct SPLA reporting. Keep it for 2 years after. That's my simple advice on that topic. So have a dedicated SPLA tool. By all means, have a dedicated SPLA tool. There are some tools on the market, so we do not sell and promote tools. I'm not happy to invite tool vendors to these lives because I don't want to be seen as dependent on somebody. We're an independent consultancy. We do consult, and as a private matter, one-to-one. If you come to me and say, we want to buy tool A, what do you think? Then we'll talk about your circumstances, whether you can, whether it supports all the features that you require, all the scenarios, hosting scenarios that you require. Sometimes you may be okay with just scripts. Sometimes you may just run some scripts, and that data can be used to report SPLA. The only problem is, obviously, the tool does better calculations. You still need to tune it. You still need to. I'll give you an example, as usual. SALs, subscriber access licenses, user licenses, access licenses to your service. Half of your customers will probably require a bespoke calculation that will extract data from their ID and then apply certain filtering rules by organization unit or by security group. Exclude duplicate accounts, exclude service accounts, because you only need to report one budget users. What else? I've seen a solution when a customer had security group to access to the firewall, which was installed as well in the same provider's data center. Then through that firewall, like VPN gateway, they also had security groups given access to a certain server with certain software. And then also, I don't know why, at the file level, they also had control lists who can actually run that executable file. So you had 3 levels of filters. For that particular customer, they had to implement a bespoke calculator of how many subscriber access licenses are actually required for that customer, based on all these 3 filters, the minimum of those 3 subsets, as you may imagine, because if you're not on in any of them, you may not access the software. So that is one of those things that tools need to support, bespoke tuning, and that's one of your manual tasks. So there's no tool where you can just install it and then click on a monthly basis and it's going to run the report. You have to maintain it on a monthly basis, unfortunately, however magical that tool is. So make sure that the person behind the tool or the scripts, especially the scripts, knows service provider user rights. Because service provider user rights, the volume licensing, if you know volume licensing, you can as well forget it. There are quite a few differences. I'm right now writing a cheat sheet again, another cheat sheet, which you can ask me to send to you. I'm writing a cheat sheet that is comparing volume licensing and SPLA, one by product, basically, what you can, what you cannot do. It's not an easy task, so it might take me a few weeks to actually finalize, but it'll be done. Even if you send me an email right now, I suggest you send it a bit later. But if you email it to me right now, I'll flag that email, put it in my special folder, like things to be done later. I'll send you a cheat sheet with all the details of comparison of licensing. Why not? I'm doing it for myself, to be honest, and I decided, I'll release it to the community, but not openly, only to those who really need it. So if you need it, let me know. But here are 3 examples. So for instance, you may remember that Windows Server has 2 minimums in volume licensing. A minimum of 8 cores per physical processor. And then another minimum, you can't, even if you have one processor, you still need to assign at least 16 licenses to a server. The 16 core minimum does not exist in SPLA. So I've had providers with legacy servers that forgot about that and they overpaid to Microsoft. They calculated 16 licenses for each of those servers, whilst they could have reported 8. Another thing that catches many is that when you assign, if you want to go with the Windows Server standard licenses, when you assign licenses for the entirety of the cores of the physical server, following the minimum of 8 cores per processor in SPLA, then you may only run 1 virtual machine under that license set, as opposed to volume licensing, in which you can run 2. There's a different number of virtual machines, and that is something that people forget as well. And they think, okay, fine, we've licensed 2 VMs. No, you didn't. You've licensed just 1. SQL Server, for SQL Server, as you may know, in volume licensing, you have per core model and you have server core model. There's no server core in SPLA, it's just SALs. You either decide, if you go with SQL Server Standard, you either decide to license it per core, or you may just license SALs and then deploy as many SQL servers as you want. I had a customer with a customer with an end customer with 450 users in total in whole AD. And they were heavy users of SQL in their business, lots of SQL Server databases. And they went with the SAL model. So they reported 450 as their head count, 450 SQL Server SALs, and they had like a few hundreds of SQL servers deployed in that platform. Saving money. Good option. Yeah, so answering Karin, answering your question, that was the exact scenario when it was smart to use SAL model in SQL. So not a huge company. They only use SQL Server Standard. They went with SALs with an important caveat. There were 2 servers providing public access, so those servers have to be licensed with cores because you can't count, every public user. You can't buy SAL for them, really. So that's an answer to your question. That's when it really makes sense. And there's another thing that you may not use Power BI reporting server in a SPLA provided data center. It's stipulated in SPLA. You may not do that. You may only use it on premises or in Azure. That's it. Client access licenses are also very confusing. So I keep forgetting that every time when we talk about SALs and CALs, and there are additive CALs or additive or cumulative, I go back to either product terms or service provider user rights and I read it. That's why, by the way, that cheat sheet that I'm putting together, I'm putting it together for myself. So I don't have to waste my time going back to SPLA or product terms and then, reread something that I could have just written down somewhere on the small cheat sheet. So there you go. Maximizing ROI, return on investment. So the financial side of things. So there are a few things that we help SPLA providers doing, and you can do it yourself. So I'll give you 4 advices basically. So I've just talked about SQL sales, which is probably number 5. Maximize return on data center addition. So when you're reshuffling your data center, please remember that Windows Server data center gives you unlimited virtualization rights. Obviously, hardware is not free, so I'm not sure if maybe at some point, growing vertically in terms of RAM and CPUs is not really a feasible solution. But there's always check that balance. Squeeze out as much value as you can from the hardware that you invest in, because data center additions. So it's not a good idea to have multiple clusters with mixed Linux and Windows. It's a much better idea to have dedicated ESX clusters for Linux and dedicated clusters for Windows. Maximize that, dedicated. Put all the things that are chargeable in a chargeable place, and put all the things that are free in a free place. Does that make sense? So that's how you maximize it. Reduce the number of requirements. I've had a customer with a 10 node cluster. 10 node cluster, imagine that. One Windows Server virtual machine, which runs Windows Server Data Center Edition. The rest is Linux. They had to report Windows Server Data Center for each node in that cluster. Why don't you move that machine to another cluster? Why? Because it was kind of logically a part of this solution. Move it to another cluster. Run it on a dedicated piece of hardware if it's just one VM. So it's, again, you can't be half pregnant. You put that one VM there, you must report the entire cluster as data center. Dedicate hardware for SQL workloads. So that's another thing. So you may actually use SQL Server Unlimited with SQL Server Enterprise as on premises. And for that, you really need dedicated SQL clusters. Again, not a mixture of SQL and non-SQL workloads. No, this cluster is purely SQL Server. No, not even that. This cluster is purely SQL Server Enterprise. And then you can continue charging your customers per instance, per license, however you charge them, per database, per service. But report to Microsoft, less money, fewer pennies, dollars, pounds. Use SAL bundles. So there's a bundle called Productivity Suite, which is, I see it less and less used because everybody's moving to Office 365. But those who still use on-premises, the flavor of on-premises service in SPLA, they report productivity SALs. So there's a productivity bundle. Read about it. And beautiful thing about SPLA is that you may switch reporting from one model to another on a monthly basis. So, by the way, tools that automate reporting, they know that. And most of the tools that I've researched, they have this function, fortunately, built in. So they understand, if in certain month your usage was cheaper to be reported as standard licenses, it would report standard. There's no commitment. It's a monthly pay-as-you-go license. So and if you have to, then it's more commercially reasonable to switch back to data center. It will switch next month to the data center. But that is why you need to keep snapshots. That's another reason why you need to keep monthly snapshots. Because if I would be auditing you and I find that right now you're in a situation where you need to report data center, and I see a mixture of things reported throughout the history of data center and standard data center, and you were switching. If I don't have evidence of that, I will assume that you always had to report data center. And the worst part of that is that I won't take into account the money you paid for standard licenses if I was an auditor. So these are the very basic advices on that topic. So my call to action, if you think you can benefit from my advice, we can jump on the free call. You can email me. Remember, by the way, so no strings attached. Ask me about the cheat sheets. Please don't ask me about everything at the same time, but by all means, I will send them to you. The core thing that we say in SAMexpert is that we promise you no bullshit, no nonsense, no bollocks. We just do services for you. I'm actually against licensing BS. I even want to be honest, I even want to publish a book that will be called something like, Encyclopedia of Licensing Bollocks and put it on Amazon. Hopefully it'll be popular. So let me go to your questions. Because we've got quite a few. So please bear with me because I'll be reading. I don't want to put every single question on screen. So Carl, you have two parts of the question. So I'll try and decipher it. If the service is IIS or Windows Server, the web page is not under this rule about SPLA applies for this product or not. Yes, it does because it's Windows Server. It's on the if it's on a shared platform, SPLA applies to it. If it is just a web page, if you run your own web page, but it's your VM running in a cluster that also runs your customers' VMs, it's SPLA. It's SPLA. It doesn't really matter. So as I said, for self-hosting rights, you really need to dedicate everything on the specific hardware. Only use Microsoft's eligible products for self-hosting. Then you'll be fine. Do you use developer software on regular? So that's Jitendra. Do we use development software on regular desktops or in production environment? Could you please elaborate on that question? This is technically possible. No. Sal for SA. Very confusing topic. Okay, let me pick this one up. So if your end customer has client access licenses that have a corresponding SAL for SA in the SPLA price list, well, let's say, what can I think about? Exchange server standard CAL with software assurance on-premise. So they may not bring these CALs to a dedicated Exchange solution in your data center, but if they complete the license verification form and send it to you, that Microsoft signed off that these licenses are actually covered with SA, then they are eligible for you to sell them discounted SALs for SA. It's a license that is required, it's a license that requires qualifying licenses under it, which are existing licenses in that customer that are covered with the active software assurance. It's discounted. It's a discounted sell. It's a discount recognizing their investment in Microsoft software, but they must go through the license verification process. Hope I answered your question. And by the way, if you like this video so far, please click like. Oh, please, but if you dislike it, please click dislike, because I encourage dislikes. I like dislikes. You know that when you click dislike on a YouTube video, YouTube actually takes it, just counts it as another interaction and promotes the video further. So please dislike it if you dislike it. You can't downvote a video on YouTube. I wish we could. Where we'll get full details about subscriber access license in service provider use rights. Simple. So there's a just Google it. So the previous version was released on the 1st of September 2020, and just a week ago, Microsoft released a new version of service provider use rights. The only change there, it's almost like byte by byte exact copy of the previous one. The only change there is Windows Server Data Center 2022, just the version. That's the only change. That's the version. Nothing has changed in licensing rules. Windows Server Data Center 2022 and Windows Server Standard 2022. So it's an exact copy of the last year's SPR, Service Provider Use Rights document, but released with this, just mentioning this new version of Windows Server. All products are licensed. So no, it does depend on the type of product. So again, look up in the SPR. Some products have SALs, some products don't have SALs. And by the way, Windows Server in SPLA does not require CALs or SALs. How cool is that? If I could promote using MVP for licensing, it doesn't. It used to exist actually. So thank you for that. Please advise if customer can use Power BI report server, SQL Server Enterprise Core with active SA on it. Not it's not in SPLA. So let me find it. Actually, you know what? Let me find it because I'm saying this, but I really want to look it up. Sometimes it makes sense to. I said something, and then I think I was actually right. Services provider, user rights worldwide. Let me switch it to this monitor. I have a pretty complicated setup here, so please wait a second. My machine right now is very slow because it runs all this streaming stuff, not through the hardware, unfortunately. And it seems like Microsoft Word has just been updated. So yeah, but keep your questions coming. Keep interacting. So so far it's been fun. We've got what? We've got 45 minutes. I'll probably finish it in 15 minutes. So if you don't mind, because I see no reason why to keep you online for so long. So where's Microsoft Word? I really want to find it. Service provider, use rights. Here you see magic. Service provider, use rights worldwide. September 1st, 2021. Just let's look for Power BI. Come on. It's not that easy, apparently. Yeah, as I said, my computer is a bit slow, so but I'm pretty sure you can't use Power BI reporting server in SPLA. Right, let's look at, whilst this is opening, let's see what other questions we have just for this SPLA versus CSP licensing. Which one is the more cost effective? That depends on the scenario. There's no single one size fits all. Otherwise, it would have been too easy. Now, let's everybody switch to CSP because SPLA is generally more expensive. It's not like that. Are CSP licenses even allowed to share device? Yes, if you have a QMTH, and there are only two products that you can use can use that way. Windows and Office 365. By the way, Carl, whom we have here in our chart, he found something that completely stunned me. Office 365 is not supported on Windows Server 2022. I really want to know the explanation to that. Right, so Power BI, come on, where is it? It'll probably be in reporting. So this is the spell. This is what it looks like. And by the way, when I told you DCP eligible, this is the part DCP eligible. I hope you can see it on my screen. If you're watching from your phone, you probably won't. It's on the right side, in the right column. So if it says an A, then you may not bring it to another data center. If it says yes, then you may. You may take it to Azure. You may take it to another data center. If it's not, it must be reported by the owner of the hardware. Right, so summary of changes. This is not interesting licensing terms. Where's the index? Where's the index? There you go. SQL Server. I'm going to be losing people now, but yeah, hopefully not. Microsoft SQL Server. What is it? There you go. Why is it an Office service? Can somebody explain to me? No. See it here. It's probably in product terms, not in SPER. That's why SPLA is so complicated. No, I won't. But you know what? Let me take it as a homework. I'll probably just publish a short video on this channel just to explain that. So I'm really sorry it wasn't here. So I just know it's not allowed. Office 365 is not supposed to serve as well. It is now, isn't it? So it wasn't. Right. Last week, there was a mention of BYOL and the specific date of time the license has been bought. Want to repeat? Yes, I will. So this is an important one. So remember what I told you about SPLA and that to dedicated hardware, you can bring your own licenses your own license without limitations. Or if you're a provider, your customers may bring their own license without limitations. Or if you're a CSP and you're helping your customers, what you must remember is there are 4 large SPLA providers. The list is simple: Azure or Azure, depending on what side of the pond you're on, Alibaba, Google Cloud, and Amazon AWS. The big 4 names. You won't miss it. It's easy to remember. Alibaba is something that I need to remember every time. So not IBM, not Oracle. So these are not counted as large providers. So these listed providers from October 2019, 1st October 2019. So make it very simple. Very simple is from the 1st October 2019, dedicated hosts in these 4 providers are treated as if they were shared. So you may not bring any license to these hosts. You may, under any circumstances, bring your own Windows Server licenses to assign to these dedicated hosts only on these 4 providers. There is one exception, but it's incredibly painful to manage. You may still bring your own licenses to these dedicated hosts if it was purchased, and you can prove it, before the 1st of October 2019. I advise my customers not to not even consider that unless they have something that's been there, sitting there for ages before 2019, and then they just continue using it like that. Then it's fine. Anything that you deploy anew, I wouldn't play that game if that was an old license, because well, it's a management nightmare. It's going to cost you more to manage that than you save. Well, we have more questions, which is good. I'd like to hear how SPLA we can identify if an environment is shared or dedicated. Is this information provided at the time use report? If yes, how do we get this information? Well, if you're a provider, I hope you're not an auditor. If you're a provider, it's simple. So if there's a cluster or a host and there are multiple virtual machines, you just ask who owns these virtual machines. And if there are 2 companies behind them, there you go. It's a shared hardware. That's what it is. So even if it's I've had cases of, but it's our hardware. It's dedicated to our use. We just provide hosting to other customers. No, it's not. So unfortunately, I had a very painful discussion with Microsoft in which Microsoft won the argument. So when there's even if it's your hardware and 99% of the virtual machines are yours, and you only host one end customer's VM, any of your customers, their virtual machine, which is their, even if you manage it, it's their virtual machine for their business use. That hardware becomes shared, and you may not use normal volume licenses on that hardware. That's what it is. Multi-tenant. Shared equals multi-tenant. Multi-tenant equals shares. Sorry, multi-tenant equals shared. I'm tired, as you may notice. Do we test and evaluate products in SPLA internally before offering them to customers? Yeah, I think yes. I think you can do that, and also you can even provide end customers with evaluations. Just check the terms of check the terms of SPLA. It's possible. I'm confused. So, Carl, the reason you're confused about BYOL a lot is not possible anymore. I only said BYOL is. Let me go back to the BYOL. Let me go back to that slide because I think I need to explain it again. So, thanks for that question. Let's do a good use of our time. So, what is bring my own license? So, this is a typical provider. I'll take your question off screen so we can see everything that's on the slide. This is a typical provider, not the big four. Please remember that. This is not the big four. On dedicated hardware, you can bring all your own licenses without limitations. Software assurance not required, license verification forms not required. The only thing I ask all my provider clients is to make sure a customer signs a written statement, gives them something in writing saying, yes, these are my licenses. That's it. There's no limitation on dedicated hardware. On the big four, there is. You cannot do that, which is in the first column. You cannot do that on the big four providers. Just do whatever you want. So dedicated hardware and big four providers equals second column on this slide. You just need to treat it as if it was shared. There is still BYOL, it's just more limited. And Azure has another thing which is irrelevant to SPLA, completely irrelevant to SPLA. Azure also has Azure hybrid benefits, which is an unfair advantage of Microsoft. So here we go. Have we got any more questions? I'll give you 5 more minutes whilst we'll be winding down. So yeah, checklists, as I told you, you can do that. So let's take you from the left corner of this slide to the right one. It's not really that difficult. I was looking for a picture of somebody sleeping well, and I had multiple pictures on my screen. Sorry, let's go back. And my wife came in and said, you know what? You really should use that cat. I don't know. Yeah, you're welcome, Carl. Anyone has, do you have any more questions today? I think if you ask me what's the biggest thing, the biggest thing is to retain your data on a monthly basis, because however frustrated you are on the left side of the slide, however frustrated you are, if you invite me to check your current circumstances, if you give me monthly snapshots of data, then we'll figure out the rest. I'll do it. I'll interview you about your services, and we'll put them in the right buckets. You know, what's licensable, what's not. We'll see if we can reshuffle stuff around and dedicate certain things. We will see what we can do about your reporting history. One of the most, by the way, probably second important part is the data that auditors get from Microsoft. In many cases, has nothing to do with how you reported your consumption. And in one of the audits, I compared the data that Microsoft gave to us with the data that the customer had internally, and we only had 15% match. 15% match. So unfortunately, the customer decided to take it with Microsoft themselves. So I wasn't present in the negotiation room when they discussed that particular point of argument. So I don't know the result, but it was stunning. It was stunning. Whose error that was, I have no idea. But it happened, and I don't see exact matches between Microsoft's data and customers' data. Make sure you have all your purchase orders, whatever documents you exchange between you and your SPLA reseller. Make sure you have them. Make sure you keep them on a monthly basis. Cats are good. They remind us we're just humans. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm more of a dog person. Yeah, no, to be honest, no, I don't care, dog or cat. I just love all the animals. What's the best way to create license compliance report for SPLA? What are the checks we need to keep in point? Just one advice or two. Make sure you cover the correct scope. You don't include what doesn't have to be included. Include what needs to be included. That taking into account all the bring your own licenses, stuff like that. And then the second part is make sure you follow exactly the service provider user rights documents formulas, which are not rocket science. They didn't change. They haven't been changed that many times as, say, product terms rules. So fortunately, all the core calculations for SQL and Windows Server, they've always been there. So the only big change was when Microsoft switched in 2016 to calls from processors for Windows Server. There are a few things. There are a few things that happened in history, but they're not that many. So one of them, for instance, SQL Server BI, which since around 2016, I think, had to start reporting as SQL Server Enterprise. You may still run instances of BI, but there are no more SQL Server BI sales, so you have to report processor cores for SQL Server Enterprise for all the SQL Server BI instances, which actually almost makes the SQL Server BI redundant. And then you need to run these reports monthly, not quarterly, monthly, because you have to report monthly. One of the big red flags for Microsoft is if your numbers are not changing. If they see static numbers for half a year or a year, ooh, you're going to be put on top of the audit list. So make sure you do the calculations and not just copy your previous month's report. No, I'm not going to give you ideas, but don't. Thank you very much. It's 3:30, so I thought this live was going to run for 2 hours. It was actually a bit shorter. I really appreciate your questions. I appreciate we had a kind of small audience today, smaller than on trainings, but very active and very on point. I do appreciate this. Come back to this channel every Wednesday at 2 p.m. British time. So what's going to be next week? Next week, we're doing a training around Microsoft on-premises desktop licensing. So your traditional Windows 10, your traditional Office Professional Plus, your traditional project, which is still in use in many, many, many organizations around the world. Don't forget, Office 365 is not yet ubiquitous. And that we're going to discuss that in connection with Office 365. How do you transition? How you account for both? How you count the requirements for enterprise agreements? So, but we're going to concentrate next week, 15th of August. Daryl will be back with me on this live. So Daryl is celebrating New Year right now, so he can't join us. It's a family thing. Karin, by all means, you can find me on LinkedIn. By the way, I think one of the easiest things to connect to me is you can email me. You can also let me put my LinkedIn link on screen. So it's linkedin.com/in/Golev, which is my surname. It's easy as that. So by all means, any questions, anytime. Okay, thank you. And as usual, save with knowledge of Microsoft licensing. Goodbye.